Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Oscar Bros. Trevor here, joined by Thomas, and we are doing our top tens and just best of 2024 so far. We're a week or so into July, but the first 6 months are gone. The year's gone by fast. We are going to be in college in less
Very
than 2
soon.
months.
Don't remind me.
Well, 2.5 months. You're a bit later,
Yeah.
but in a couple of months, which is wild. Very big year for us, but we've still found time to watch plenty of films. I think I'm at 66 and you're at 33.
Exactly half.
Exactly half. Yeah. But we figured we'd share our top tens of the year, and some additional awards at the end.
Yeah.
So let's just jump in. Do you want to start or do you want me to?
You can start. Why not?
All right, cool.
I mean, our number one will be the same anyway, so we'll.
Yeah, I think our top two is the same.
Yes.
So yeah. Okay. My number 10 is Daughters. This is a documentary by Angela Patton and Natalie Ray. It's a film I saw at Sundance. Very much emotionally affected me, made me cry. And it's about this group of. It follows a bunch of different girls. It hones in on like 3 or 4 of them, and it's about them preparing for a daddy-daughter dance with their incarcerated fathers. And it's part of like a fatherhood program in Washington D.C. jail, and since then the program has expanded to a lot of other areas. But on the surface, it feels like it could just be a pretty sentimental like Netflix doc, and it was picked up by Netflix, where it tells the story and it plays on your emotions, and then it makes you cry at the end. And it does that, but it does work at a greater level where it spends a lot of time with the fathers as well, and kind of analyzing and understanding almost purely just through documentary work. Like there's very little, from what I remember, like text on screen or anything like that, and just kind of showcasing life in prison and how unjust a prison in a lot of circumstances is, and how inhumane prison can be, particularly for the type of crimes that these people are doing. And it highlights. It's a very political film in that way, while not being overtly political. It does really stick true to the documentary form of just showing, and just the power of putting a camera somewhere and letting the audience understand, and letting the voice speak. And I think it's really effective in that way, while also being a very tender and intimate coming of age story about these girls as we follow them over the course of like 5 years, in their interactions with their fathers. So yeah, really, really incredible documentary all around.
Nice. My number 10 is one that you've seen. I don't think it's on your top 10, but it's Didi.
It is, actually, and it's my number 9.
Oh, there we go. Perfect.
We can just talk about it together then.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite a simple film on the surface, but I think it's just achieving everything it wants to achieve very well. It goes for that cringe comedy for a lot of points, which may not work for some people, but for me, it really worked, and it's one of the it's very visceral, the comedy. Like, it's not always a pleasant watch. We did watch
on an online screener. There were multiple points where both of us were just like, oh god.
Yeah, exactly. It's got that kind of vibe going for it. It's a very simple coming of age story, as I said, but I think it's so believably told. I think the lead performance from the actor is amazing. I assume it's his debut. I don't imagine he's been in anything else.
Isaac Wong.
Isaac Wong, there you go. And it's doing a lot with his family relationships as well. It's not just the sort of typical school stuff that you'll see in films of this nature, but it's also exploring his relationship with his sister and his mother, and how his race plays into it, and how his sort of, all of these things are sort of coming to it at once. It's very breezy. It's very well paced. It's very easy watched, and one that I think will just be a universal crowd pleaser as we go through the year, and one that is worthy of your attention.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think it's it gets there with its emotions, and it's in the words are tough, in the end, in a way that doesn't feel forced. Like I think it does for a lot of comedies, where it's a series of bits, right, and then it wants to have this grand emotional conclusion. But the threads are there, and it does throughout the film. It takes a breather, and it allows for these more intimate, tender moments between the family to show. And it's just a really perfectly heartfelt depiction of growing up during that era. We were both like 5 or 6 years afterwards, but you can relate a lot of the things, I think, to growing up, with a group of friends on the on the early internet. And I think also as a depiction of the internet, it does some really nice editing to where it doesn't feel disjointed and unnatural, and it makes it feel like the internet is a part of this world, which is very necessary, I think, for the structural foundation of this film, because the internet is so vital to the way in which the characters interact in different relationships and are started
Yeah.
and ended throughout the film.
No, it's just a
uh
brilliantly constructed film, like just from the
yeah, yeah,
ground
yeah.
up. It knows the beats that it wants to hit by the climax, but it doesn't feel reverse engineered in order to get to them. It just feels like a
Yeah.
natural and very endearing, as we say, portrait of this boy's
Yeah,
coming of
no,
age.
it's very much a universality and specificity thing. Like he struck the chord like so perfectly, struck all the right notes, to the point where I think that it can be relatable to anybody of any age as a coming of age story, because he hit this era of coming of age so perfectly.
For sure, for sure.
So
But
yeah,
that's your
all right.
number 9, so
Yeah,
I'll do
that's
my
my
number
number
9
nine.
as
So I'll just let
well,
you read right
which
into
I
your nine.
think Trevor thinks will maybe be a controversial pick, but mine is Rob Peace.
Yeah,
This
I
was
don't
one
get
of
this.
the ones at Sundance. A lot of people apparently didn't like it. I'm bemused as to why this wasn't liked. I found it to be charming. I found it to be moving. I thought Ejiofor's direction was very good. And I thought that, yes, it was just sort of telling this guy's story. But I do think there was a very core emotional through line throughout between Rob Peace and his relationship with his father. I think that emotional through line enabled the rest of the film to really work, and you understood his character motivations the entire time, the entire way through. So it wasn't just this fact thing like this happened, then this happened, then this happened. I think Ejiofor is able to bring a certain level of gravitas to everything that's going on, and you're able to understand it. It feels like a very sort of hindsight portrayal of this guy's life, and I think by the end it is very moving, and it is a very tragic story at its core. It's one that is maybe an easy film to make. Like the source material, the guy's life it is based on, is an easy story to adapt to screen. I'm not saying Ejiofor is doing anything major in terms of bringing this to a cinematic format, but I think he is very competent in doing so, and I think he is able to capture something very human and very emotional with it. So yeah, I don't know why people don't like it. Maybe they think it's boring, maybe they think it's dull.
It's
I'm getting
very
the impression
boring and
that's what
very
you think.
overlong in my book,
It's
but
not overlong though, because everything is needed. Like there is not a scene in this I don't think is in aid of the overall stuff that he's going for. So I don't think it's long, and I don't think it's badly
I
paced at all.
I don't know if I disagree, but I'm glad you liked it.
Fair enough.
Um, my my number eight is another Sundance film. It's Good One by India Donaldson. This is her debut feature film, and it also features one of the best debut performances that I've seen in a while by Lily Calais. At least in a lead role, she was in a very, very minor part, I guess, in Palm Trees and Power Lines. But as far as a debut feature, oh, I think you've frozen.
I did freeze. I should be back.
Okay, cool. I will
Yeah,
just lead in with Good One again.
cool. Sounds good.
It should be fine. Okay, 3, 2, 1. So my number eight is another Sundance film. It's Good One by India Donaldson. It is a her debut feature, and it also features one of the best debut leading performances that I've seen in a while. I believe it's just an overall debut work. She's maybe been very very small part in other things, but Lily Calais as the lead in this film is absolutely incredible, especially for her age and first major role. Like a really really deft, nuanced approach to this character that I think is really the focal point between this kind of back and forth between her father and her father's friend on this camping trip, and she plays off of them so well and works the character dynamics in a really nice way, to where every single beat of this, every single line of dialogue feels believable. And I'm very much drawn towards these type of conversational films and these type of Kelly Reichardt style nature, just in America type work. So I was going to be predisposed to liking this, at least stylistically and formally. But it really, really works, and it goes in directions that I don't think are entirely expected, but they all feel earned. So yeah, no, I think it's just a really it's slight, like it isn't going to be like overwhelmingly impactful, but for what it's trying to do, I can't really think of how it could have been executed much better. I just think it's a really, really great, tight, like 90-minute dramedy. More drama than comedy.
Yes.
But yeah, just really well packaged, well performed, well directed, well written. Just a really, really strong film that I'd highly recommend.
Yep, I
Going
mean,
to.
I've seen this one as well, and I would agree for the most part. I don't know if I entirely agree with the moments around, but I do think that the conversations and the dialogue in the screenplay throughout is really quite captivating. I think the relationship between her and her father is really well built up in very little time with
Yeah,
very little exposition. I think it is all really in the performance
it's
that you
the
get that.
first act
So, as
especially
you
is
said,
like geniusly written. I think to set up the.
yeah, yeah, but I think it is. I think it is an astonishing newcomer performance, and definitely one of the best I saw out of Sundance. So
Yeah,
yeah, I'm
it's not
still
on your
very
list, right?
positive on the film. No, it was about 14, 15
Got it.
on
Cool,
my
cool.
list. So yeah.
All right, what's your eight?
My eight is the final Sundance film on this title. I know it's been very Sundance heavy early on, but The Brief History of a Family. This was a Chinese film where essentially it's to do with one child policy, and then the parents find that there is another kid who's sort of more academically intelligent, knows what he wants to do, is more driven, and it's sort of like kind of Saltburny in the way that he starts to replace him. And it's just very fun. It's very over dramatic. It's very different in terms of tone to a lot of Hollywood films, and very refreshing in that regard. I've not seen many Chinese films. I don't know if this is standard of that kind of thing, but it does feel overacted at points. It does feel over dramatic at points, but I do think that it creates this very unique tone that I think really works. I think the plot and the way it unfolds is clever. I think what it's doing in terms of pitting these two children against each other is interesting to see how this one guy, he's got this thing he's passionate about, but like the world around him seems like that's not what's important, and he just seems like a kind of loser character. And it is sometimes fun to see protagonists in films that don't really have many redeeming qualities. He's kind of a spoiled brat for most of
Mhm.
the film, the main child. But I think there is still something quite lovable about him. I think it's an interesting exploration of the one child policy and the effects of that, and the very negative effects that something like a policy like that would have. And so, yeah, it manages to build in all of this context very well, whilst also being just a very fun time. It's like it's sort of this weird comedy thriller kind of thing that was just unlike anything else I'd seen at Sundance, and unlike anything else I've ever seen, really. And not that it's anything groundbreaking or completely novel, but just something that I would highly recommend seeking out if this concept to you sounds interesting.
Yeah, no, I thought it was pretty good. I wasn't quite as enamored with it, I think, as you were. I did find it a bit um almost too clean and polished, I think, to really dig under the surface. But I still had a good time with it. I was still overall positive despite my issues. Um, my number seven is something that you're gonna have a lot higher on your list, so we will talk about it more. But it is How to Have Sex by Molly Manning Walker. I thought that this film was excellent. We have a review up
We
for
do
it
have a review for this one,
as
yes.
well, where we talk about it a lot longer. And
We've
Thomas,
got a review for Didi, I think, as well. It's
yeah,
worth
yeah,
mentioning.
we do. If you want to check that out, but Thomas also got the chance to interview Molly Manning Walker. Some great clips in there if you want to go watch and listen to our review. But I mean, yeah, this film is just incredible. It within the first scene, it just viscerally gets you there and with these girls and with these characters to where you're feeling everything that they're doing on a visceral level, and it so consistently keeps you with this rapid fire pace in this atmosphere where everything feels like it could go wrong at any second, but you don't quite know when. And then when the moment hits, it like you feel the sense of panic, like it's pulling you along like on a string with the protagonists of the film. And I haven't seen a film in a while like this that just so quickly grabs you by the throat and does not let go until the end, to where you feel a bit out of breath. It's a very tense thriller. It's a very human film at its core, though, and exploring, I think, a lot of really heavy and important issues with a very nice deft touch. So yeah, no, really, really loved this overall.
Exactly. I may as well touch on my thoughts now, and we'll just sort of skip over it when we get to where it is in my
Yeah, yeah.
list. But
So
yeah, it was really interesting to hear that they actually filmed most sequences twice, once with the script and then once was improvised. And I do think you genuinely get that sense that a lot of this does feel improvised. A lot of that is building to create this very naturalistic group of friends immediately. Like, you're immediately sold on Mia McKenna Bruce's character. You're immediately sold that all of these people, yes, are just these sort of teenagers, immature in some respects, mature in others. They do really feel like very grounded and very fleshed out characters, which I think is vital if you're trying to explore these sorts of very heavy topics that I think are incredibly important in sharing. Now, I think there's going to be a program in Britain in PSHE lessons, which is like the sort of you learn about sex and you learn about money. It's just sort of just the everything lesson. But there's actually going to be a program where this film will be shown to students across the country, and I think that is very important because of the conversations that I think that it can stir.
And it never feels preachy.
It never feels preachy. Exactly, it never feels forced. It all feels earned, and it all feels like this is just what the film is going for.
And by the end, it doesn't have this like, like cheery, and it was all okay in the end.
Exactly.
Like it feels comfortable with being uncomfortable.
It feels comfortable with being sort of ambiguous and being delving into these unknown sort of grey areas. I mean, a lot of these aren't grey areas, but unfortunately, the way that we talk about them and the way that they are portrayed and perceived can be considered as such. So, yeah, I do just think this is one of the most important films.
And it's a debut feature, which is ridiculous.
And for a debut feature,
the confidence to pull off this tightrope of tension throughout the film, like absolutely incredible. I mean, Mia McKenna Bruce, one of like I think a top 3 performance of the year for me. Like, she is stunning in this role. Deserves all the flowers that she has been, and hopefully will continue to be getting for this work. Great film. And this will be higher in your list, and we can just skip over it when we get there. But what's your 7?
My 7 is another directorial debut feature, and that is Monkey Man from Dev Patel. This was a real surprise. Like,
I haven't gotten around
I'd seen the trailers. It's sort of, I just felt, okay, it's doing the John Wick. There was that Bob Odenkirk one that was doing the exact same thing as well. It's kind of one of those things. But really, I think to describe it as such is really underselling what this film is actually going for. Like, it touches quite heavily on Indian politics and the class system that exists there, and it's all about social mobility, and he's using this violence. It explores the ramifications of violence. Like, it's very viscerally violence, but none of it is glorified in any way. It's all very heavy. So it not only works in that regard on an action film level, some of this is the best action film, like best action sequences I've seen, but it's also delving into where this violence comes from, where it can help in some ways, where it can't help. It explores the ambiguities around violence, and I think that is very important for an action film like this to do. I think there is times when it does spin its wheels a bit towards the middle act, but I do think it all comes ahead in a very impactful climax that really works and really pays off everything that is set up in the first act. I think to act, write, direct, and produce this film is an incredible talent from Dev Patel. Like, it's not just his direction that is really competent and really stylized and really sort of flashy and in your face. Like, he's already feels like he's developed his own style of filmmaking with the stuff he's going for. But also his performance as well is really good, and it's not one note like I was expecting. Like, John Wick's kind of always John Wick. Keanu Reeves is always kind of doing the same thing. He's a bit one note in those films. Dev Patel is actually exploring. He's actually got a lot more depth, and there is a lot more for him to do. Perhaps that's because he wrote it himself, so he wrote himself a very nice, juicy part. But either way, it is one that I think you instantly connect with the character, and it's just got a lot going for it under the surface, and I think doesn't ever hold it from being just a very fun action film on the surface. So definitely a must-see this year if you're interested in action films anyway, which, because I'm not really, like, I'm not a big action film guy.
I'm also not, but I don't know, you've been very high on this throughout the year.
This one really just worked. Yeah, exactly. It's such a fun film with a bit more to chew on, than you might expect.
For sure. My number 6 is Love Lies Bleeding by Rose Glass. I'm quite a big fan of Rose Glass. And I really fell in love with this film. It's tackling a lot of ideas. You got queerness and family, body image, desire and identity, and all of these different things. You have Kristen Stewart, who's playing this lonely lesbian gym manager. and Ketty O'Brien, who's playing this bodybuilder who comes through town. And Kristen Stewart has these ties in with her family that she doesn't really want to come to head. And then, it all just kind of bubbles under the surface, and it feels very grimy and it feels very dirty until you get this explosion into like the end of the second act, into the third act. And it's all really well constructed to where it all feels earned. It has such a distinct visual style, where it feels like every element is in conversation, and they're all playing off of each other to build this really familiar but distinct aesthetic. I think all the performances are really, really quite strong. And by the end, it builds this kind of interesting way of looking at external identity and how we perceive ourselves, and particularly how that's related to queerness in American subculture in these southern, midwestern type towns. And yeah, I don't know, I also just had a lot of fun watching it. It's the most I've like gasped it in, it was like, oh, I didn't film this year. So very, very fun, and I do think that there is a bit to dig into as well. But yeah, no, really, really just love this as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, I was quite positive on this one as well. I agree. I think there is quite a lot of thematic work going on under the surface, and I do think a lot of it connects and does pay off at the end. Wasn't as into the sort of quite abrupt shift into surrealism that they take towards the very end, but I know that's something that you're
I
more
I enjoyed that.
predisposed to like.
I think
Exactly.
movies don't have to be interpreted literally. I think
I
that
know, but I did feel it was just a bit abrupt and did take me out of a very good established atmosphere that I think it captures in the opening two
yeah,
acts.
I thought
But
that there was a nice explosion of the atmosphere that
sure,
was separate.
sure. But like,
I
yeah,
think
I also just I don't think I was ever predisposed to liking this as much as you. It's just not the kind of film that really
yeah,
connects
I
with me
like the type of
emotionally.
dirty
So
explorations of America.
exactly, definitely one that I appreciated more than I would say I really sort of loved and really enjoyed.
Sure, 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 sure. Alright.
Oh, my go.
It's your turn.
My number six, and this is another one we've talked about fairly extensively. It's received a lot of discourse, funnily enough, and that is challenges.
Mm,
I really love challenges. I think that the love triangle was perfectly established. I think that all three of them are phenomenal in what they're doing and so different and so varied. Like it's not like Mike Face and Josh O'Connor are the same character. They are, they're all their own separate entities. They're all existing in their own sort of worlds, and it's just so fun to see these worlds colliding against each other in with such a well-structured film. Like I think that the way it structured everything around a tennis match, as we said, it's quite a simple thing to say. It's like it's like a tennis match, but like it is, and it wraps it up in a very fun way. I think most importantly, this film maintains that sense of fun. It knows what it wants to be, and is perfectly suitable. Just sort of saying fuck it, let's just have fun with this. Let's do a techno score. Let's be in the side of tennis ball at one point. It just is having fun and allows you to just sit back, relax, get invested in this very campy drama that they've got going on. And so, yeah, like it's not doing very much under the surface. I do think it is a little bit surface level. But at the end of the day, when you have such a twisty, turny narrative that really captures you with the performances and on a technical level is just like unlike anything I've ever seen, really, in terms of the stuff that it's doing. Like you are just really taken aback by what this film is doing, and as long as you sit and just sort of let the film wash over you, I think you'll have a great time.
yeah, this is one I had a lot of fun with this. Overall, I am quite positive. I ended up giving it a 7. I don't make it seem like I didn't like the movie. I found it just very, very shallow, and it left me a bit cold, and just felt kind of a bit repetitive to me, where it could have delved more into the nuances, and it just felt very comfortable staying on the surface level. And I feel like it kind of spun its wheels a bit. So I don't know. I think it's brilliantly structured, but I think that the structure is far more interesting and nuanced than the actual narrative that it contains. But all that being said, I still do enjoy the film quite a bit. And like it's number 16, like it is quite close up there. But I unfortunately didn't fall quite as in love with this as other people, but still a very, very fun time. My number 5 is We Grown Now by Minhal Baig. This film I really, really loved. I it's also one that's grown on me quite a bit the more that I've sat with it. So
So
it's
ironic.
about, huh?
So sorry.
Oh, we grown. Yeah,
It's
okay.
fine. It's cheap. It was cheap. I know. You know.
Yep.
You can cut that one out of the editing if you
No,
want.
I was gonna ask you to
I was
edit this
just
one,
saying.
so
Oh, fine. Yeah, yeah.
it's
I'll
up to
cut that.
you. Um, but
Or I'll really emphasize it and then put like a laughing track behind, just so the fans know that.
yeah, this was supposed to be funny.
Yeah.
Anyways, it's about two young boys who are just growing up in the Cabrini Green public housing complex in 1992 Chicago. And people often talk about how, a place can be a character. And this is the most prominent example I've seen of that, except for maybe the number one film that we have. But I think it's so beautifully paints this portrait of not only this place and everything it means and represents within the narrative of the Cabrini Green housing complex and the positives and the negatives, but also it has this really beautiful reflection on in the third act on what it means to be from a place and how you can feel connected to that place and what that means to your memories of growing up. And it almost takes this Malick type approach with this like gliding cinematography and this visual poetry feel to the entire film. The child actors are really quite good. Blake Cameron James and Gian Knight Ramirez are the main two actors for both of them. I believe it is their first film. It's hard to find good child actors. Keep these boys employed. Like they were excellent. Journey Smollett turns in an amazing performance as the mother. I thought that she was really quite good, and it just kind of I don't know. It's the type of film that just really emotionally washes over you, and you just get such a feel for the rhythms of this place, and it's really quite a joyful film amongst all of the the bad things going on there and their house being raided by the police or one of their classmates being shot and killed. But it still finds a way to find joy in the act of coming of age despite the circumstances. And it's just a very I don't know. It's a film that's just very happy with life, while also having a more nuanced approach than just like, you know, being happy with life. So yeah, I really really love this movie, and I honestly want to rewatch it. I have it at an 8 right now. I could see myself bumping it up to a 9. I know you haven't seen it. I think that
No.
you would like this film quite a bit. It is probably the most underrated or least talked about that I have this high up on the list, but I genuinely cannot recommend this film enough. Really, really fell head over heels in love with this movie. So yeah, please everybody seek it out when it's out. I think it is out on streaming now.
Yeah.
So yeah,
No,
please watch.
I'll definitely try and seek that out. My number 5 at this point. Perhaps the most surprised I've been coming out of the cinema to have enjoyed it as much as I did, and that's Inside Out 2. I
Mm,
was not expecting to like this. I thought it was going to be, a bit of a soulless cash grab, one of sort of Pixar sequels in the Pixar sequel vein. However, it's far from that. It is such a natural extension of a film I already love. I think everything that it adds brings new layers to this world. And I think it's a really important in the messages that it is giving out. And like, that is not like, it could have been very simple in terms of the messages, but it like, especially when you're exploring things like anxiety, very heavy topics for a kids film, especially, but like, it could have done that very simply. Instead, it doesn't. And it treats the audience with respect and it arrives at very important conclusions that I think is important for kids to take away, and not just kids. I think there is something even in adults to take away from this film in terms of what it's trying to say. I loved the way they took the story with Riley and specifically like how they weaved everything together. I think it's a very tightly constructed film. Like every single thing, every sort of incident has a consequence in like three different locations, and it's very clever in the way that it builds all of these things on top of one another, and just sort of it feels so effortless in the way that it arrives at the climax. And I think the climax is very emotionally impactful. There's one sort of still frame that still sort of burns into my mind where anxiety's holding the control panel and Joy sort of puts her hands out, and it's that kind of visual metaphor that yes is simple. Like this concept is very easy to understand, but I think it's told in such a charming, careful, considerate way that it really just works and it really just washes over you. So definitely a film I was not expecting to be on the top 10 list,
Mhm.
but one that I'm glad to see has made it.
Yeah, no, I mean it missed out on mine, but I like this film quite a lot, and I like you was very very surprised with it. I think it is quite deft in how it portrays its themes. It doesn't feel like a retread,
No.
in any meaningful way. I found it a bit unbalanced, but I could forgive it just because of how much fun it is and how much it does really have a strong emotional core, which is I think all you can really ask for from a film like this.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, for sure. My number four is a film that I just recently watched in preparation for this because I thought I was gonna like it a lot, and I in fact did. This is Hundreds of Beavers, by Mike Cheslick, I believe is how you pronounce his name. Um, it's another debut feature, and my God, what a project! I had just it's such a fun film. It's a comedy, I suppose, and it's playing off of like the silent comedies of Charlie Chaplin and Buster Keaton. I saw someone, and I can't remember who, but someone on Letterboxd said like this is the type of film Charlie Chaplin would make if he was like an iPad baby. And I can't think of any better way to put it. It is so infused with pastiche and homage to these types of things. It feels like a live action Looney Tune. And it isn't just pastiche and homage. It quite literally is that. It is a 1920s silent comedy. It is a live action Looney Tune, but it also infuses so much of contemporary humor and like formal style. Like there are framing devices that are taken directly from video games. And it merges all of these different conflicting pieces of art together into something that just feels so beautifully like its own. It's I believe there's a Paul Schrader quote about how making a film is like, pulling different pieces from the plates of filmmakers before you. It's like this cinema is just like this giant buffet, and then you can take little pieces to make your own plate. And this is one of the best examples I've seen of that. We just had a long, like hour-long conversation
We
before
did.
we recorded,
Yeah.
about like art in the contemporary era and how the best way to infuse these modern formal visual styles are that we're seeing with like video games and with YouTube and TikTok. And this is one of the best examples I've seen of taking from the contemporary and weaving it together with the old to create something novel and bold. And this is how you push cinema forwards. It genuinely is. This is how you push art forwards. And I don't know what more you could ask for. It's I mean a laugh every 20 30 seconds. Like the comedy is ridiculously consistent. It's not saying anything on a deep level, but it is such a fun time, and I think it will be looked back on as a cult classic and also a boundary pushing film for this era. So yeah, really, really enamored with it. Really loved it. Everything up to this point has been an 8. This is the first 9 for me. So yeah,
I was going to say, yeah, it's only number 4. You must have had a good year, which obviously we'll
yeah,
get to because our top 2 are the same and are indeed masterpieces. But my number 4, and we've talked about this one at length, so at risk of not starting another argument about this and not
God,
at saving you from getting slated in the comments again, my
yeah,
number 4 is Dune 2. I think that it achieves the grandiose scale that it is going for brilliantly. I think visually it is just a remarkable film. I think that it is touching on ideas of religion and how these things start and power and all of that kind of stuff in interesting ways. I think everything that it does to expand the world is brilliant. Because I was not like, I thought the first one was good, but I was not a Dune lover in that way, whereas this one really just sort of washed over me. Like it is truly an epic in that regard. It is long, but I don't think you necessarily feel the length, or at least everything feels important and everything is building to a climactic finale, which I think works for the most part. I did have a problem with Zendaya and Timothée Chalamet's relationship, Paul and Cheney. But to be honest, I don't think that detracted from the film majorly, and I still think that if you want a sci-fi epic, which I do tend to like these sort of big sci-fi projects like this. I think that it creates an amazing world, and just lets you breathe in it and let you live in it, and just achieves everything that it is going for to an immaculate degree, really. So I think this is a testament to cinema, which I know you're really going
I
to
don't think
disagree
it's
with
a
that
bad
statement.
movie. I just think it's very okay. I think it's very lacking in substance. I think it's very thematically confused. I think the direction is quite awkward and lacks interiority. I think it's very very dry and emotionless in a way that it doesn't really strive to be. I don't like the way that Villeneuve constructed, conceived or executed this film. I think visually it looks nice enough. I think that the performances keep it watchable. There are some fun sequences, but I think it's a really flat and uninteresting film that isn't doing that much and just kind of looks pretty.
Well, I think you need to, have more fun. But anyway, what's
I've
your
watched
number
the
four?
movie 3 times. I've tried. I
Fair
don't
enough.
know,
Fair enough.
but I just talk about a comedy that I do have fun, and I'm going to talk about another comedy right now.
You can feel your full thoughts on that on the
Yeah,
channel.
we
I
we
don't know how
argued
long
for
the
like
videos
30
go.
minutes about this movie, if
Yeah,
that's something that you're interested in.
probably. Yeah.
Um, and then the comments all called me a pretentious asshole. So
Yeah, and they basically said I was right. So,
yeah. So
not to get
you
smug
love the
about it,
conversation on
but
that video.
yeah, exactly. I love to comment on that video because they understand that Dune is a brilliant film. Dune Part 2 is a brilliant film, and one that will be worthy of the Oscars that it picks up at the end of the year, no doubt.
Okay. My number three is The People's Joker by Vera Drew. This film is astonishing. It does a lot of the same things as I just talked about with Hundreds of Beavers, where it feels like a groundbreaking, boundary pushing piece of art that is pulling from so many influences. And so when I reviewed the film, there were a bunch of comments that were like, "Oh, this is just stealing from DC. How is this creative in any way?" Clearly you don't know how filmmaking works, okay? Like it isn't just, oh, I'm going to, take a character and a couple of characters. Like they're completely molded into their own archetypes that fit the themes of this film. Um it feels cheap but intentionally so in a way that really sparks like uh queer camp classics like it's edited. It was made almost entirely through COVID, and it's edited with a bunch of green screens, and it can be a bit jarring at first, but once you are able to get into the style and just let it wash over you, um, just allow yourself to be taken on the ride. It is really fun and chaotic. The humor is really, really striking, both visually. So many visual gags, not only with just what characters are doing, but with the backgrounds and how the film is edited, and there's formal gags as well, like as far as the construction. Um, but I think what elevated this slightly above Hundreds of Beavers is that it is a genuinely heartfelt and tender story about being trans and gender dysphoria and what that means. And it's such a personal story for Vera Drew. And I just think taking these characters and we'll get into our film at number one, but transness and media and queerness in media and finding yourself through media, I think is quite an important thing. And I think that this takes that in a very literal sense and is quite literally using these characters to tell a story while also making it her own. Like this is bold, radical art. And I absolutely loved every second of it. I don't know what else really more to say. I did a full review if you want to go watch it. But this film is beautiful and incredible and lovely and funny, and everybody should go support it.
Yeah, I mean, I've not seen People's Joker. I've avoided it because I don't necessarily think it will be to my sensibilities, but I'm glad you enjoyed it. I'm glad you're getting the name out there for people to go and watch that. My number three is How to Have Sex. So I think we are now ready to talk about our top two because we touched on that one obviously earlier.
Yeah. So number two for both of us is Ryusuke Hamaguchi's Evil Does Not Exist. This is a film that we did do a full review for. I've seen this movie 4 times, multiple times in a theater, and I absolutely love this film, and obviously we both do, as it's for both of us the number two film of the year. It is so thematically rich and dense. It feels like a worthy follow-up to Drive My Car for how good Drive My Car is. This is a lot more, I think, stripped back in scale, and it is just very honed in and focused on this Japanese town. But it's dealing with so many ideas of, capitalism and how we treat nature and our relationship with nature, and how different relationships of exploitation work both between people from person to person, and person to nature and corporations, and all of these ideas. And they're illustrated in this really fascinatingly beautiful and serene way, that almost disarms you, and really lets you lull into this sort of safe sense, where it's constantly disarming every antagonist that is brought up, until there is this explosion where it directly plays off the title. And maybe evil doesn't exist if we turn a blind eye, and we just allow the systems to work as they do, and we don't question anything about the capitalist constructs of our society. But if we do take a closer look, there's quite a bit of evil there.
Yeah.
So yeah, we have obviously longer thoughts, and I'll let you go. But
Yeah, because I mean, I think sometimes when watching a film, you just sort of feel like you're in the hands of a competent filmmaker. I think
Mhm.
Hamaguchi brings such a guiding hand through this and is so authoritative without giving you any answers. And I think that is such an important balance to strike for this film to work. Like, he knows exactly what he wants to say, and you feel like through, if you decode the layers of meaning in this film, if you sort of try and unpack about it, it's one that really rewards thinking about it. It's one that
Yeah.
really rewards you actively
Oh yeah, the more
engaging
you sit with
yourself
it, the better it
in the
gets.
film. Exactly. It feels like the answers are all sort of there, but weaved into this such tight puzzle of a film. Like, as you said, character motivations are constantly switching. I think Hamaguchi's got such a understanding of people, and as you said, it is exploring all of these ideas about capitalism and greed and nature and our relationship with nature,
Mhm.
but it's not doing so in a forced way. It's not trite, it's not boring to watch. It is all wrapped up in this very
It isn't
personal
preachy, it also
story.
is natural, yeah.
Exactly, it's such a personal story at its core. One that can really only, it feels very contemporary in how, and natural in how it sort of builds off COVID, and like, yeah. And as I said, it's really it's the characters that make this film work and are the driving force and the fuel behind this film, that allows the ideas to flourish and allows you to really just become invested in exploring them. Like, I want to explore these ideas, I
Yeah.
want to think about them further, because I had such a good time watching it the first time. And yes, the ambiguous ending is there. Like, it doesn't give you any answers, but that is the
Mhm.
point. And that is at the core of its film. And as I said, back to the beginning point I made, the fact that Hamaguchi is able to keep such an authority over the film, like it's a film that you only feel could have come from a director of his caliber,
Yeah.
and a director as competent as him, and him as a director. Yet also, it's one that that engages you as a viewer. I think it's such an important balance to strike, and I think it does so perfectly, really. And I was a real toss up between this and the eventual number one, which we'll get to, as to which would be my favorite film. But like, this is definitely going to be up there, at least top five by the
Yeah,
end of the
I'd
year.
be surprised if this wasn't top 5 for me by the end of the
No,
year. It is,
exactly.
and I think how it works is that the ending is so strikingly ambiguous,
Yeah,
yet you still feel like you get that knockout punch, like, it still feels breathtaking, and it still feels correct by the end.
mm,
Like, it feels like everything works, even though
yeah,
in your brain it shouldn't feel like that.
yeah,
And that is just the work of a director who reaches beyond the screen and is able to, reach into his audience and manipulate us as his audience directly down the mental path that he wants us to, even when, the surface level ideas of the images aren't necessarily presenting us with that path. Like,
for sure.
it's astonishing directorial work.
Yeah, because I mean, he keeps you at an arm's length. I think what's brilliant is he keeps you at an arm's length. You're never truly sort of emotionally
But he
engaged in the
lets you
story,
feel like
really,
he
but he
isn't.
lets you feel like it is, and it's sort of like a parable in that regard. And I
Yeah,
think that is the
it's
same
tonal
feeling that you get
poetry.
from Drive My
Like,
Car. Exactly, it feels like you're just sort of watching Hamaguchi move these characters about,
uh
and but yet you are invested, and so I don't know how he's achieved that, really. I can't
yeah,
really put
it's
into words how
incredible.
he's achieved such a sort of objective yet subjective experience, but it's just all the pieces of filmmaking working in unison to really just create something magical, to be honest.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Um, but into the number one. So I think if you follow me on Letterboxd or Twitter, or if you watch the review I did with Sam, you know this is coming. It's Jane Schoenbrun's I Saw the TV Glow, but I was very pleasantly surprised to hear that it's also Thomas's number one. So I'll chime in with my thoughts in a second, because people have heard me talk about this movie a lot over the last month or so. But I'll let you take it away because you also love this film a lot.
I did, and to be honest, I haven't had that kind of feeling coming out of a horror film as I have probably since Midsummer and Hereditary and Ari Aster's work, which is among my favourite films of all time. So you know it's going to be
Yeah.
top tier work when you're getting that just visceral, horrific feeling. And I think that is something that is sadly been sort of lost in the conversation and discourse about sort of the themes that it's going for, the allegories that it's touching on, the metaphors that it's striking, which is obviously very, very, very impressive. I think as well as that, it is also a fantastic horror film
Hmm.
with this kind of psychedelic, I think it's been described as Lynchian before imagery. I think
Hmm.
that is the perfect way of putting it. But there are so many sequences in this that will just now be scarred into my brain in the way that only the best sort of horror films
Hmm. Give you a
can
nightmare.
achieve.
Like,
Yeah, exactly. Genuinely, it did give me a nightmare. One character, if you'd call them a character, sort of entity in this film
yeah,
that exists, but it creates this feeling of discomfort and doesn't ever let you go from that. And I think that is so integral to this film's success, is that from word go, you're sort of made uncomfortable. You don't like watching the film, but obviously that's a positive thing when it's a horror
yeah,
film. You don't want to be enjoying the experience. It's a horrifying experience throughout. And one that just, yeah, as I say, really viscerally sticks with you. I think the performances are immaculate. I do think Justin Smith but is maybe one note throughout, but I don't think that's a problem because that is the whole point. Like, he is a restrained character.
yeah.
He
And
is a
he's
character
almost
who
forcing himself
can't
into being one note.
exactly. He's a character who can't afford to be a character like this, and I think that is
Hmm.
a really interesting beat to strike. And yeah, as you said, like, it's exploring so many stuff allegorically, which I think even if you're not someone who's trans, that's a clear message that it's striking. That's a
Yeah,
clear feeling that it's trying to instill you with. Even if you don't directly resonate with those things, I think everyone can find something to resonate in just the way that the tone captures you and doesn't let you go. And you've said that it makes you, it sort of captures the feeling of dysphoria.
yeah,
And I think that is achieved. And I think Jane Schoenberg, they are able to create such striking visual imagery. And
yeah.
I think now, matched with a narrative that I was actually invested in, I did not like We All Goes to the World's Fair, just to preface, but with
I
a
for the
narrative
record
that
think
you're
it's a broken
invested in,
movie, but
yeah, but with a narrative that you're invested in, with characters that feel grounded and in a setting that feels grounded and so well fleshed out, I just think that it creates for a masterful piece of work that will stay with me for a long time, just in terms of the way it is able to create such a visceral feeling.
yeah. No, I mean I mean I've talked about it with you as like it's a coming of age film about a character who constantly rejects coming of age, and it is you think about the story circle, right, and you have this call to the unknown, and yet Owen as a character constantly rejects the call to the unknown, and it is so frustrating to watch, and it's a horror film really. What's actually happening in the narrative isn't that much. It's finding horror out of things that are relatively normal, but makes them feel so intensely not normal, which I think,
I mean, it's
evoking that.
young canny. I mean, it's a literal sort of depiction of young canny in that regard. It's taking
Yeah,
something
yeah,
that's normal, but it's flipping it and it's making it uncomfortable. And it's that kind of reversal that really works about the film. I think
yeah,
that
yeah.
is that is what fundamentally
No,
makes it
it,
such
it it feels like it's
horrifying
holding up
experience.
a mirror in a way that feels so uncomfortable to where you don't want to look at yourself,
Yeah,
right?
because it
Like,
is our world, and you get the sense that it is our world, but it feels
mhm,
different. It feels wrong
right.
immediately.
And I just that feeling. So, I've talked about this a lot of different places, but like I've dealt with dysphoria quite heavily in disassociation and all of these things that the film is tackling, and in ways that aren't really resolved for my personal self, and I'm not going to get too heavily into because I don't even know really how to talk about them in a nuanced way. something that I'm still working on and working through and in therapy and all those fun things. But it's so strange and unnerving to watch a film that is making you feel something and is evoking a feeling within you that you was an unwanted feeling, and something that has, put me in some of the darker moments in my life, and it was forcing me to confront memories that I'd forgotten or, intentionally, not remembered, in a way that was it was very uncomfortable, but it was almost cathartic at the same time, and I do think that there is this optimism towards the film. And I guess just to finish the first thought, like it's strange that other people are also experiencing this, and that is able to be evoked simply through formal language. And there are certain lines of dialogue, particularly performed by Bridget Lundy Payne's Maddie. There's their monologue in front of the constellations, as well as talking at the bar, and it articulates things that have felt so intangible to me for so long in such a directly tangible way. So obviously this was always going to be a very, personal film to me, but the fact that that feeling of discomfort is able to be reaching other people, I think is really, really special, and just incredible feat of filmmaking that Jane was able to reflect their own experiences and not just tell them to people, but make people viscerally feel it.
Mm,
And that's like a once in a generation type accomplishment for a filmmaker. I think it's really truly incredible.
for sure. For sure.
Um,
And I also think like the thing that you mentioned briefly was as well the sense of optimism that still
yeah,
arrives despite you being launched
there's
into a
still time.
perpetual state of horror. Exactly,
Yeah,
there's still time. And I think a lot of that optimism comes from it almost feels nostalgic, this
yeah,
film, in a weird way, in the especially the first act, the way that these memories are sort of translated to screen. It almost feels I think you get that hindsight perspective, and obviously Jane is a trans person in real life. And I think you can feel her presence throughout, and you can feel that sort of nostalgia. And I think that's just a really important thing because then it allows you to arrive at this optimistic conclusion. I think is really important. It feels, I think the thing that separates this and Evil Does Not Exist for me is that it feels more important, and that's
yeah.
a very hard thing to quantify. What makes a film important, etc., etc., gets you into a rabbit hole of philosophical questions that we're not going
Yeah,
to touch on
but, like,
in
it
this
feels like a film that could
video.
only be made now, like, it couldn't be made 5 years ago, it couldn't be made 5 years from now, even though it's about the '90s, it feels
Yeah.
so important to now in our
It
relationship with
feels
media
both,
in a
yeah.
meta modern way, like,
It's got both that contemporary feel and that hindsight feel. That is again such a hard balance to strike, but I think it is hit on perfectly, and it really
yeah,
does. Yeah, it's a masterpiece in atmosphere, and yeah, because
yeah,
all the things that it's doing as well with sort of the VHS tapes as well. It's tapping into a certain like horror of the past while
mhm,
still in like is a film that could only be made now whilst the debates around these issues are so unfortunately prevalent.
yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's just it's truly, I mean, yeah, it is a masterpiece. Like, it's a film for our time. Jane Schoenbrunn is a filmmaker for our time. They're a visionary. Like, and I mean, I think they're going to be an incredibly important filmmaker to this generation. Their work is going to be so incredibly influential while also being so singular and impossible to replicate. Um, yeah, no, I mean, it is really for me just a perfect film on so many different levels. Like, it works on a technical level, like it's so beautifully shot. The editing is really tight and crisp while never feeling like overly rushed. Like, it's perfectly paced. It reveals information to you at all the right times. The makeup work is haunting.
Hmm.
um there's so many impactful sequences that are going to be seared into my brain forever, in a way that's both horrifying but also kind of a cathartic reminder to myself, and in a way that I do think can be applicable to really anybody, but obviously more directly applicable to, specific people. But yeah, I it's it's a perfect movie. It's again
I
for me.
think it is, yeah, phenomenal in pretty much every regard, tonally, thematic wise, in terms of how it is formally constructed. I think this is really a faultless film, and I actually had it at 9 on the Letterboxd. I think I will bump it up to a 10 after this video,
Let's
because
go.
I think it is. Even the faults, as I say, even though I think Justice Smith is, slightly the same character throughout and doesn't really change, that is the point, and there
That's the
is a
point. Yeah.
reason for that, exactly. So, yeah, I think it's really hard to find faults with the film. If you're not engaging with the tone, if it's just something that you don't like, fair
Right.
enough. I
If
think,
you weren't going to read the language to begin with, if it wasn't going to be for you, then sure. But
yeah,
if you're willing to read the language, it's one of the most beautiful things you're ever going to read.
definitely,
Like,
definitely.
yeah, no. Well, that's it. Those are our rankings. We're gonna give out some quick awards for our favorites of the year. I think they're gonna be
Pretty similar across the
pretty
board and
similar
pretty unanimously in favor of one film.
for of one specific movie. Yeah.
Yeah,
And I saw the TV Glow is my only 10 of the year, and I think it is now for you as well.
it is. Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but yeah. So best director of the year, I think we're gonna be handing that one to James Schoenbrunn.
Indeed, indeed. Yeah, we can basically do these collective awards, even,
I
really.
know, yeah,
But yes, no, indeed.
yeah. Lead performance, for me is Justice Smith. Is it for you, or you're handing it to someone else?
I would give it to Mia McKenna Bruce, just
Fair. That
because
would be
I
my
think
number two.
she deserves the flowers, exactly. And just to spread the love a bit more. So
Yeah, a
yeah,
little bit.
Mia McKenna Bruce in Abs of Sex. I'll give that one to.
Um, best supporting performance for me is also my favorite performance of the year, Bridget Lindy Payne.
And I'd agree
Um,
with both of those statements. So
yeah. No, I mean, again, their monologue in front of the constellations, explaining the feeling of the passage of time and their suicide attempt, and just that, and when they start crawling towards the kid, like it is. I mean, I don't have words for that sequence. It is
yeah,
a tour de force of acting and
I'll be
yeah,
honest, what really shows me that that was such a powerful sequence is that I didn't even clock that it was a monologue whilst watching. It took
yeah,
me like about 5 minutes after. I was like, that was about 5 minutes of just straight monologue, which I didn't
yeah,
even realize just because you're so wrapped up in the words and how powerfully they're performed.
yeah. No, it's truly stunning and incredible. And I think it's gonna be a hard performance to top for me this year. Like it's yeah, stunning. And surprise, surprise, best screenplay of the year for me is Doom Part 2. No, it's I saw the TV Glow.
I would actually give this one to Hamaguchi for even
That's
the
fair.
points list. I
That's
just
my number
think,
two.
yeah,
Yeah,
I think the screenplay for that film, the way he is able to balance all of these elements, is just phenomenal. And
yeah.
I want to spread the love a bit as well.
I'm perfectly fair with that. Yeah, yeah. No, I think that's fair. I think it's fair. But those are awards. But yeah.
Yes,
So,
obviously Best Picture, just to
oh,
clarify, in case
best
anyone
picture
was
is of
wondering,
course for
is
both of
of
us
course,
the
yes.
only 10 to 10 of the year. It's I saw the TV Glow. So yeah, but those are our awards. Those are our top 10s of the year so far. We'll see how much they change. There's always gonna be some surprises. Like very excited to see films like Honora and Sing Sing, Seed the Sacred Fig, All We Imagine This Light, all very high.
And there's
Um,
always going to be some things from festivals like we hadn't heard of After Sun in July
yeah, and that
before,
ended up being
so
our favorite movie of the year for both of us. So
exactly. There's always films to look forward to in the future. Even though this year may look a little weak on the surface, there's still plenty of stuff to get excited about. So
absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah, but that's where we're at right now. We'll see how it shifts towards the end of the year. We'll of course do our top 10 at the end of the year, as well as our big awards group
indeed.
ceremony with Jack and
Yes, it's
Sam and
always
Anthony and Charlie
chaos,
Tucker,
but
and
yeah,
always chaotic. I'm gonna be fighting for my fucking life, keeping Dune out of everything.
yeah.
But but it'll be fun. It'll be fun. So thank you everybody for watching. We will have Oscar predictions up probably around the time as this. We're gonna have reviews up as well for plenty of films. Long Legs coming up by the time that this video is out. So lots of fun stuff. But make sure that you stay tuned. And until next time, you can follow us on Letterboxd and Twitter if that is something that you're interested in. But for now, thank you everybody for watching. Stay safe and goodbye.